He was the most notorious gangster in American history. A man who built a criminal empire in broad daylight and became a twisted sort of celebrity. His name was Alphonse Gabriel Capone, but the world would come to know him as Scarface. This is the story of his meteoric rise and dramatic fall, a tale of ambition, violence, and the ultimate price of power. Our story begins not in the blood-soaked streets of Chicago, but in the crowded tenements of Brooklyn, New York, where Capone was born in 1899 to Italian immigrants. Like many kids in his neighborhood, his formal education was brief. He dropped out of school in the 6th grade after a physical altercation with a teacher and soon found his real education on the streets. He fell in with local gangs like the infamous 5 Points Gang, learning the brutal logic of the underworld. It was during this time, while working as a bouncer at a rough-and-tumble bar, that he got into a fight and was slashed across the face with a knife. The resulting scars earned him the nickname Scarface, a name he absolutely despised. He much preferred to be called Snorky, a slang term for a sharp dresser, which reflected the stylish image he would later cultivate. But Brooklyn was just the training ground. Capone's destiny lay westward. In 1919, he received an invitation that would change his life. It came from Johnny Torrio, a fellow Brooklyn mobster who had moved to Chicago and was building a powerful criminal organization. Torrio saw potential in the young, ambitious Capone and brought him on as his protege. Capone quickly proved his worth, becoming Torrio's trusted right-hand man just as a new golden opportunity was dawning for organized crime. Prohibition, the nationwide ban on alcohol, created a black market of unprecedented scale, and Torrio and Capone were perfectly positioned to exploit it. The year 1925 marked a major turning point. After a brutal assassination attempt by a rival gang left him severely wounded, Johnny Torrio decided he'd had enough. He retired from the violent life of a mob boss and, in a symbolic gesture, handed the keys to his vast criminal kingdom to his 26-year-old protege, Al Capone. With the reins of power now firmly in his grasp, Capone didn't just maintain the organization. He supercharged it. He expanded the Chicago outfit's operations into a colossal empire built on bootlegging, illegal gambling, prostitution, and protection rackets. His business was crime, and business was booming. By 1927, his personal fortune was estimated to be around $100 million, an astronomical sum for the time, equivalent to over $1.5 billion today. What made Capone truly unique was his relationship with the public. Unlike other gangsters who operated from the shadows, Capone lived in the limelight. He craved public attention and masterfully courted the media. He presented himself not as a violent criminal, but as a modern-day Robin Hood, a simple businessman providing a service alcohol that the public desperately wanted. He was a walking contradiction. He ordered murders with chilling efficiency, but was also known for his extravagant charitable donations, funding soup kitchens and providing for the poor. He was always seen in public dressed in the finest custom suits, dripping with expensive jewelry, and projecting an image of charm and generosity. For a time, this strategy worked. A significant portion of the public, fed up with Prohibition, saw him as a folk hero, a man who defied an unpopular law. But this carefully crafted public image was about to be shattered by an act of such brutal violence. It would shock the nation to its core. February 14th, 1929, Valentine's Day. On this day, the simmering gang wars of Chicago boiled over in a horrific massacre. 7 members of the rival North Side gang, led by Capone's main adversary, George Bugs Moran, were lured to a garage on North Clark Street. They were met by men dressed as police officers who ordered them to line up against a wall. What happened next was not an arrest, but an execution. The gangsters were mercilessly gunned down with machine guns, their bodies left in a bloody heap. Al Capone had a perfect alibi. He was miles away at his home in Florida. But no one was fooled. The world knew who was responsible. The St. Valentine's Day Massacre was a turning point. The public, who had once viewed Capone with a degree of amusement or even admiration, was now horrified. The romanticized image of the Robin Hood gangster was replaced by the reality of a ruthless killer. The federal government, embarrassed by Capone's flagrant disregard for the law, felt immense pressure to act. President Herbert Hoover himself reportedly declared Capone public enemy #1 and demanded his takedown. The challenge for law enforcement was immense. Capone was an expert at insulating himself from his crimes. He never personally pulled a trigger, and witnesses were either too loyal or too terrified to testify against him. The feds knew they couldn't get him for murder or bootlegging, so they decided to attack him from a different angle: his money. A two-pronged assault began. On one side was the famous Eliot Ness and his team of incorruptible federal agents, nicknamed the Untouchables. They relentlessly raided Capone's illegal breweries and distilleries, disrupting his cash flow and gathering evidence. But the truly fatal blow came from a much quieter, more meticulous group, agents from the IRS, the Internal Revenue Service, led by forensic accountant Frank Wilson. They embarked on a painstaking investigation to prove that Capone, despite his immense wealth and lavish lifestyle, had never filed a single income tax return. They followed the money, tracing the profits from his illegal empire through a complex web of front businesses and ledgers. The big break came when they discovered a ledger detailing payoffs from a gambling operation that directly linked income to Capone. The law was clear: even illegal income is taxable. In 1931, the net finally closed. Al Capone, the untouchable gangster who had controlled a city, was indicted not for murder or bootlegging, but on 22 counts of federal income tax evasion. After a high-profile trial, he was found guilty on 5 of those counts. The judge sentenced him to 11 years in federal prison, the longest sentence ever handed down for tax evasion at that time. Capone's reign was over. He began his sentence at a federal penitentiary in Atlanta, but even from behind bars, his influence was felt. He managed to bribe guards and live a relatively comfortable life, still able to run his empire from the inside. To truly sever his connection to the outside world, the federal government transferred him in 1934 to a brand new, maximum security prison designed to be escape-proof, Alcatraz. On the Rock, there were no special privileges. Capone was just another inmate, number 85. The isolation and harsh conditions took their toll. But an even greater enemy was attacking him from within. Years earlier, Capone had contracted syphilis. Left untreated, the disease had progressed to its tertiary stage, neurosyphilis, which attacks the brain and nervous system. While imprisoned in Alcatraz, his health deteriorated rapidly. The once sharp, cunning mind of the criminal mastermind began to fade. He became confused, erratic, and his mental capacity regressed to that of a child. By the time he was finally released from prison in 1939, after serving about 7.5 years, he was a shadow of his former self. The powerful gangster who had held Chicago in his grip was gone, replaced by a sick, broken man. Al Capone spent his final years in seclusion at his sprawling estate in Palm Island, Florida, cared for by his family. He was no longer a threat to anyone. On January 25, 1947, after suffering a stroke, Al Capone died from cardiac arrest. He was only 48 years old. His life serves as a powerful cautionary tale about the illusion of power and the inevitable downfall that follows a life of crime. He was a product of his time, a man who exploited a flawed law to build an empire. But in the end, he couldn't outrun the law or the devastating consequences of his own choices. Thanks for watching. If you found this story fascinating, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next deep dive into history. See you next time.